One of the tenets of our project, improvisation composition, the double identity of European music, is that there was always a strong relationship between composition and improvisation, an interplay that took on different forms in each historical phase. On the one hand, music theory and aesthetics have focused their attention on composition as the reflective elaboration of musical material and the fixation of musical ideas in a written form. On the other hand, improvisation has shadowed the act of composing and sometimes even left its mark on music theory itself. It is precisely this reciprocity that characterizes the field investigated in this section of the project, which is dedicated to collective improvisation in the second half of the 20th century. This slide presents the most influential ensembles that animated the world of improvisation during the 1960s and 70s. The first page shows the lineups of Gruppo di Improvvisazione Nuova Consonanza, Musica Elettronica Viva, AMM, and Euphonic Art. On the second page, you can see a selection of ensembles more directly connected with European jazz. The intersection of composition and improvisation is particularly striking in the first group of ensembles. Most of their members had studied composition and could boast a wealth of experience in writing music. They continued to work in the field of composition, both simultaneously with the involvement in improvisational practice and afterwards. Let me cite just a few cases. Alvin Curran studied composition with Ron Nelson at Brown University and finished his studies under the guidance of Mel Powell and Elliot Carter at Yale University. Frederick Rzewski began studying with Randall Thompson and Walter Piston at Harvard University, then went on to Princeton University, where his teachers were Roger Sessions and Milton Babbitt. After which a Fulbright scholarship brought him to Italy, where he was able to further his studies with Luigi Dalla Piccola. Franco Evangelisti began his composer apprenticeship under Daniele Paris and then continued in Freiburg under Harald Gensmer. Mario Bertoncini, Ennio Morricone and Ivan Vandor were just some of Goffredo Petrassi's students in Rome. Egisto Macchi was taught by Hermann Scherchen and Roman Vlad. Vinko Globokar was one of René Leibovitz's students before continuing with Luciano Berio. Cornelius Cardio served a fundamental collaborative apprenticeship with Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, another leading figure of the Darmstadt Circle. Free musical improvisation is part of the development of the artistic avant-gardes, which Erika Fischer-Lichte characterized as the performative turn. The change of paradigm primarily appeared in the domain of theater, where, similarly to music, a net distinction is made between text and performance. This is not a mere technical duality, simply referring to two specific forms of mediation, but it also has an ideological component. Since most theater studies, and to a certain degree also musicological studies, had left the performance factor in the background. The musical improvisation ensembles are part of this process, precisely because they direct attention to the live performance. Here, the performance must not be understood as the interpretation of a given text, but as a creation of musical meaning in real time. The relationship with the audience is directly linked to the specific situation of the performance and can't hardly be generalized. In her influential book, The Transformative Power of Performance, Fischer-Lichte observed, as the terms improvised and improvisational suggest, both being derived from the Latin improvisum, id est the unforeseen, An improvised performance is characterized by a high degree of contingency. How it develops is impossible to foresee and predict in advance, and remains a mystery for all participants until its very end. This way, it exploits the scope of the autopoietic feedback loop to the full. In such cases, the mutual, or better still, shared responsibility of performance and spectators regarding the course of the performance and what it implies stands out clearly. The emergence of improvisation ensembles made clear that the sonic rendering of a score is a special manifestation of a large sphere which is defined as musical performance. Non-written cultures present numerous examples of a musical meaning which is molded during the performance and does not exist in any form outside it. When improvisation ensembles play, performance appears in a radical form, as the production of musical meaning in real time, and not as a sonic interpretation of a pre-existing text, or as an extemporization from internalized models. Free improvisation presents the qualities mentioned by Fischer-Lichte in her book: tactility, eventness, dynamics, materiality, and this in emphatic guise. For this reason, the investigation of this area of music making has consequences for the theory of musical performance itself. It is surprising, but at the same time highly significant, to see that Theodor W. Adorno recognized this relationship already in a note that he took in 1954 for his projected theory of musical reproduction. The text must contain at its center a theory of improvisation, for what characterizes interpretation in its concise sense. Its problem is always related to the improvisatore. A series of cultural and political factors that contributed to the formation and orientation of these ensembles can be traced back to the Dialectic of Liberation. A 2 weeks long conference with this very name was held at the London Roundhouse in July 1967, giving voice to issues which will be soon articulated by the so-called 68 movement: the critique of consumerist society, anti-psychiatry, anti-militarism, libertarian education, protection of the natural environment, aesthetic enhancement of everyday life. A first piece of evidence of these dialectics resides in the relationship between the individual and the community. The improvisation group is set up as an author collective. The contribution of each individual flows into an unexpected and new whole. And in turn, each individual undergoes a learning process which leads him or her to a more heightened awareness. A passage of an article by Friedrich Zewski illuminates this context. The collective character is as essential to this music as is its freedom, for it is only in free associations of the many, rather than in domination by a few, that a breakthrough can be achieved to a new and necessary stage in the creative process, in which cultural goods such as music can be removed from the greedy and exploitative condition of the marketplace, and made to serve not the perpetuation of the star system, but the needs of people. Secondly, improvisation was seen as a practice that lies beyond the bourgeois conception of art, and thus plays an opposing role within the social structure. The critique of the institutional setup may manifest itself in the predilection for unusual locations for public performance, open, non-structured spaces in which the members of the audience can freely move or change position. We see here a picture of an open space concert by Globe Unity Orchestra in the early 1970s. In an improvisation ensemble, the dynamics between the musicians are egalitarian. There is no hierarchy amongst them, and everyone has full freedom to act. The very evanescent nature of improvisation makes it alien to the commercial world. Its mode of production is open to participation outside of private property and marketable products. Thirdly, since the emphasis lies on the creative process, the meaning is equally distributed between sound production and the behaviors connected to it. Thus, in the years of the anti-establishment protest, improvisation could be considered as a political act tout court. It was linked to the rejection of reified communication and to the utopia of a community of free spirits. Each of the improvisation ensembles is characterized by a specific performance style. It is distinguished by a sound aesthetics which can be understood as the tangible manifestation of a collective consciousness. Such a stylistic mark does not correspond to the simple sum of the individual inputs, but is rather an identity kernel arising from the unplanned accord necessary in any collective improvisation, as well from the accumulated group experience. Let us examine this point with a comparison of video-recorded performances by Nuova Consonanza and Euphonic Art. Unlike Nuova Consonanza, the same musicians featured in most of the Euphonic Art's performances and on all its records. Carlos Roque Alsina, keyboard, Jean-Pierre Drouet, percussion, Vinko Globokar, trombone, and Michel Portal, clarinet. These four skilled and well-known musicians also performed with the Musique Vivante and Domaine Musical ensembles. Portal is one of the key figures in European jazz. Drouet studied the Indian tabla and Persian drums. The pursuit of sound that characterizes their improvisations is linked to the instruments. The overlapping of lines, set up in a personal way, gives rise to different types of textures that gradually change and could last indefinitely. Let us take a look of a clip from Musique Vivante, 5 jours au Palace, produced by Philippe Harry Blanchette and Charles Brabant and broadcast in 1973. The members of Nuova Consonanza have been replaced a number of times, and each improvisation is marked by the number of performances in which musicians on which instruments take part. Whereas new phonic arts music is characterized by the input of energy, its enhancement and dissolution, such features play a subordinate role for Nuova Consonanza. Instead, the compositional categories of counterpoint, timbre, and form are restored in a context that is radically different from composition, even from one that uses aleatory notation. In this framework, the preparatory exercises serve to provide a preliminary internalization of the contrapuntal and formal models that are closely linked to the instrumental gestures. The types of counterpoint and form that are used in the following excerpt are related to post-serial composition on the material plane. The piece unfolds from a texture of saxophone, trumpet, and trombone superimposed with the interventions of percussion and electric organ. The musicians look at and listen to each other, paying heed to the possible polyphonic combinations of lines, which recall the free counterpoint of serial compositions. When this process is dissolved, a void is created with only the sound held by the double bass left behind. This is followed by a new texture of the three wind instruments, based on similar criteria to the previous one. The excerpt that we will see and hear is taken from a documentary by Theo Galler and Hans-Jörg Pauli for the Norddeutscher Rundfunk in 1967. Morricone, trumpet, Vandor, tenor saxophone, Heinemann, trombone, are disposed as an independent bass trio. Branchi, double bass, Evangelisti, piano, Cain, Hammond organ, Bertoncini, percussions are around them. Let me offer some more words about the preparatory exercises of Nuova Consonanza. They referred to playing techniques, types of material, and forms of interaction. These exercises were repeated so many times that a non-conventional flux of communication was established. Some exercises had to do with parameters, for example, pianissimo or very fast. Other with performing techniques, for example, moving the airs of a violin bow under the string of a grand piano, or even behaviors, for example, an exercise called chain reactions. The goal was to focus on one aspect, to observe it from different perspectives, and avoid a hypertrophic superposition of actions. Other areas of investigation were the transition from a particular sound to the next one. For example, how to move from pointillistic textures to static sound fields. Or how to integrate strange sound production on instruments and noises from newly built sounding objects. In the first phase of Nuova Consonanza, 1967-1971, these critical investigations of sound material issued a particular style of improvisation that is easily recognizable, even though the ensemble plays mostly in changing formations, trio, quartet, quintet, or in separated subgroups.